The ground shakes as hundreds of horsemen surge across an open field. Atop them ride the Polish cavalry, sabres drawn, lances held high. Ahead stands the German army, a wall of panzers, armored vehicles and machine guns. It is the ultimate clash of centuries. Horse against tank, steel against steel. Brave, foolish, hopelessly outdated, an entire military charging headlong into modern industrial warfare, with swords and lances. Total nonsense. The fighting near Krojanty on September 1st, 1939, became a propaganda myth so thoroughly spread that it made front-page headlines, filled history textbooks, and became accepted as fact around the world. Why? Because the Nazis needed a weapon. Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine seized on early battle reports to portray the Polish military as primitive, celebrate the unstoppable rise of German mechanized warfare, and reinforce the image that resisting the Reich was futile. In the aftermath, German and Italian war correspondents were shown dead Polish cavalrymen and horses alongside German armored vehicles. The scene had all the ingredients of an extraordinary story: horsemen, sabres, dead horses, and German armor. Soon, those ingredients became a story about Polish cavalry charging tanks. Because post-war politics found the myth useful, Poland's Soviet-backed government had no reason to challenge the story. It helped portray the pre-war officer corps as outdated and incompetent while presenting the new regime as the country's modern savior. But here's what makes the myth so convincing. The Nazis didn't have to invent everything. The horses were real, the sabres were real, the cavalry charge was real, and German armored vehicles really did enter the fight. So how did those real pieces become a story that never happened? To understand that, we need to go back to the afternoon of September 1st, 1939, the first day of the German invasion of Poland and the opening day of the war in Europe. Poland itself had existed again as an independent state for barely 20 years. After more than a century divided between Russia, Prussia and Austria, it had re-emerged in 1918 and spent the next 2 decades rebuilding its country, economy and armed forces. Now it faced Nazi Germany, and the Polish High Command was under no illusion about the balance of power. Germany possessed a vastly larger industrial base, a far more powerful air force and greater mechanized strength. Poland's strategy was not built around defeating Germany alone in a prolonged war. Under Plan West, Polish forces were to resist the invasion, slow the German advance, preserve their fighting strength, and hold on while Poland's allies, Britain and especially France, brought pressure against Germany in the west. Time mattered. Every German unit delayed was a unit that wasn't advancing somewhere else. Every hour bought gave Polish forces more time to withdraw, reorganize, and continue fighting. And near a small village called Krojanty, that strategic problem was becoming very real. German forces were advancing through the Polish corridor. Polish troops of Operational Group Czesk were being forced to withdraw. Helping cover that withdrawal was the 18th Pomeranian Uhlans Regiment, commanded by Colonel Kazimierz Masterlesch. Their job wasn't to sacrifice themselves in some romantic last stand. Their job was to delay the Germans. But that raises an obvious question. Why, in 1939, was Poland still sending cavalry into a mechanized war? Because these weren't medieval soldiers who had somehow wandered onto a 20th century battlefield. They were the Uhlans, the famed cavalry of the Polish army. And when you peel back the propaganda piece by piece, something surprising happens. Much more of the legend was real than you might expect. Did they use horses? Yes, but horses were transport. Polish cavalry were mobile infantry. They rode into position, then dismounted to fight on foot. Horses gave them mobility across roads, forests and difficult terrain without depending entirely on trucks or fuel. But when serious fighting began, the horse was normally a way of getting to the battlefield, not the weapon itself. So the horses were real. What about the swords? Did they use sabres? Yes. Polish cavalrymen still carried sabres, and under the right circumstances, against exposed troops in the open, a mounted sabre attack remained a legitimate tactical option. So the horses were real, the sabres were real, and that is exactly what made the rest of the story so easy to believe. What about the lances? By 1939, lances were no longer standard combat weapons of the Polish cavalry. They had been withdrawn from normal battlefield use before the war and survived mainly in training and ceremonial tradition. But that still leaves the central problem with the legend. A mounted saber charge against exposed infantry could work. Against a tank, it was useless, and Polish cavalry doctrine never pretended otherwise. Polish cavalry was never expected to fight tanks from horseback. In serious combat, the Uhlans dismounted and fought as mobile infantry. Against armored vehicles, their regiments had purpose-built anti-tank weapons, including 37mm Bofors Model 36 anti-tank guns and the high-velocity 7.92mm Model 35 anti-tank rifle. Against the lightly armored vehicles common in 1939, both were genuine threats. The horse got the soldier into position, the anti-tank weapons did the fighting. They knew perfectly well what a tank was, and they knew perfectly well that you didn't attack one with a sword. Which leaves one final question. If the Polish cavalry didn't charge the German tanks, what did they charge? Late that afternoon near Krojanty, Master Lesz's Uhlans encountered elements of the German 76th Infantry Regiment. And what they found wasn't a wall of panzers. It was German infantry, exposed in the open. Master Lech saw a tactical window. His men had mobility, they had surprise, and they had an enemy vulnerable to both. The order was given. They didn't charge with lances. 2 squadrons of Uhlans drew their sabres and surged across the field. And now, after everything we've just established, comes the strangest part of the entire story. The cavalry charge was real, and it worked. The German infantry panicked and scrambled for cover. The German advance was disrupted, giving Polish units withdrawing from the Chojnice area precious time to escape. The disruption was serious enough to throw elements of the German 20th Motorized Infantry Division into confusion. Then, disaster struck. German armored reconnaissance vehicles arrived and opened fire on the exposed Polish cavalry. Suddenly, the Uhlans were caught under machine gun and automatic cannon fire. They broke off the attack and withdrew. Colonel Kazimierz Master Lech was killed along with a number of his men. They didn't charge armor, they had charged infantry. The German armored vehicles entered the fight afterward. And now, across those fields, were all the ingredients necessary to create one of the most persistent myths of the Second World War. Dead horses, dead Polish cavalrymen, sabres, and German armored vehicles. When war correspondents were brought to the battlefield afterward, the scene appeared to tell its own story. The myth didn't need to invent the pieces. It only had to put them in the wrong order. It made for a sensational story, and more importantly, it served a purpose: to portray Poland as backward and its soldiers as hopelessly outdated. And that is how a tactical cavalry attack on exposed infantry became a story about an entire country too primitive to understand modern war. The Polish cavalry didn't die out of foolishness or medieval fantasy. They fought as trained soldiers, taking a calculated tactical risk in the chaos of battle. But their bravery was stolen and turned into a punchline. One history would take decades to correct.